Sociolinguistics, Language, Society, and Schooling. So what is sociolinguistics? Sociolinguistics is the study of how societal norms are intertwined and influence language. It is the study of how and when we use language, how culture influences how we speak. It is the study of dialects and tone. It also looks at how social class and ethnicity influences a person's language. All in all, sociolinguistics is a lens through which a person can look through to study and understand language more deeply. Sociolinguistics becomes very important in a classroom with many English language learners, or ELLs, who are striving to develop proficiency in English, because they may lack the background knowledge needed to speak with communicative competence. While although an ELL may know how to transform a thought into an English sentence or phrase, communicative competence refers to the language user's grammatical knowledge as well as the social knowledge. Grammatical knowledge being the syntax, morphology, phonology, and semantics of a language, while the social knowledge is more concerned with how and when to use utterances appropriately. Helping ELLs understand the social implications that are tied to language will support the social, emotional, and cognitive growth of an ELL while they develop English proficiency. When two or more people communicate with one another, we call that system that they use a code. Multilinguals have the ability to code switch to use one method of communication with one group of people, then switch over to a different method of communication for another group. Code switching does not always have to be defined as a speaker switching between two distinct languages. Code switching could also occur when an individual switches from formal, professional language to casual, informal language. For students, this could be switching the type of language they use when they are speaking with a teacher in the classroom and the language that they would use when in the cafeteria, speaking with a friend. Communicative competence would allow a student to effectively code switch in this manner. Communicative competence, as described in our text, Ways with Words by Shirley Bryce Heath, and An Introduction to Sociolinguistics by Ward Hugh and Fuller, is the ability to understand and to use language effectively to communicate in a wide variety of contexts for a wide variety of purposes. Ward Hugh and Fuller's text breaks communicative competence down into 4 branches that are all working together to use language effectively. The first branch is linguistics, which can be described simply as understanding and using vocabulary, language conventions like grammar, and syntax. The second branch is sociolinguistics, which is having an awareness of the social rules in a language, the acceptable nonverbal behaviors, and the appropriate cultural references. The rules of a language could include the formality, the politeness, and the directness of the language used. The cultural references could include idioms, expressions, and background knowledge that's needed when speaking. The third branch is strategies. Strategies are often techniques that are used to overcome language gaps. Techniques for planning and assessing the effectiveness of communication, techniques for achieving conversational and written fluency, and techniques for modifying text for different audiences and purposes. The final branch is discourse. Discourse is described in our texts as understanding how ideas are connected. Ideas could be connected through different patterns of organization, with conjunctions or transition words. All 4 branches come together to build an individual's communicative competence. Linguistics use the term vernacular to refer to a language a person uses in everyday, ordinary, commonplace social interactions. It is important to note that particular vernaculars may meet with social disapproval from others who favor another variety. In particular, Standard English is a preferred vernacular because it is heavily influenced by the written form of English. In order for a standard form of English to develop, a norm must be accepted. Choosing one vernacular means favoring people who speak that vernacular. This shows how language can reflect social order through the use of particular vernaculars and establish social hierarchies. Standard English is described by Trugel from his 1995 publication as usually used in print, taught in schools, learned by non-native speakers, spoken by educated people, and used in news broadcasts. This is crucial, as our text also describes how identities are linked to social group membership, which focus on the presence of shared sociolinguistic norms. This is particularly best noticed in our text Ways with Words, where the people from Rhodeville are the white working class community who for generations worked the textile mills but no longer work the textile mills, and the people of Tracton, the black working class community who currently works at the textile mills, who for centuries worked on the farms. Their ways with words link the people to a social group grounded in their social linguistic norms. This novel also explores a pattern of language called dysglossia, where two languages or two language varieties differ in terms of their status in society, where one is more prestigious and is used in formal contexts, and the other is reserved for more casual events and interactions. Our text also mentions the markedness model. The markedness model tells us that ELLs will typically desire to go unmarked or follow suit with acceptable norms. ELLs desire to go unnoticed, to fit in, to adopt standard English vernacular. Our text by Ward, Hugh, and Fuller also discusses the use of Creole and Pidgin languages, which are formed from people who speak different languages, who are in contact with each other and must figure out a way of communicating. Of the two languages, one will typically fit the description of a superstate language, the language that is socially, economically, and politically more dominant. The other language or languages are referred to the substrate languages, typically the native languages of the speakers who contribute to the development of the Pidgin or Creole language. One example of a Creole language is Jamaican Creole, where English is the superstate language and native African languages are the substrate languages. Distribution of Pidgin and Creole languages is closely related to long-standing patterns of trade, including the trade in slaves. Although the formation of Creole and Pidgin language is not common in our U.S. classrooms with ELLs, mixed language is a common phenomenon. A mixed language is a language whose lexical and grammatical structures cannot be traced back to a single source or parent language. Mixed languages develop when there is a widespread of bilingualism, where there is no need for a lingua franca or creation of a common language to communicate. Spanglish is an example of a mixed language that typically uses the grammar and syntax of English with the vocab or lexicon of Spanish. This is very similar to the example of Maya that our text references. It is a mixed language, also called Mabugu, which is spoken in the Usambara Mountains of northern eastern Tanzania. The structure of the language is largely Bantu, but the lexicon is at least half from Cushitic languages and Maasai. All in all, our texts emphasize that languages are constructed both linguistically and ideologically. Our text also refers to the reality that languages change over time. Referencing linguistic anthropology, it has been found that speakers distance themselves from one another over time and space, and from this new dialects are formed. Eventually, these new dialects become new languages, or language variations. Other forms of language variation include different speech used in different social classes. Speech can be used as a criteria for assigning membership to a social class. Language variation can also exist within one individual. Dialect mixture occurs when an individual speaker speaks one way in one context and another way in a different context. For example, the way an individual would speak during a job interview would greatly vary from how he or she speaks during happy hour at a local bar. Variation is also found in language through identifiable variants. For example, saying the words fishing and singing can be pronounced fishin' and singin'. These are identifiable variants that are found throughout Heath's text Ways with Words. Both the people from Rhodeville and Tracton use a variety of identifiable variants in their commonplace conversations. Many of these identifiable variants are considered social markers that are noticeable and carry social information. They reveal information about the speaker, where they may come from, their social class, or circumstances that may have influenced their use of that particular identifiable variant. People become aware of these social markers, social groupings, and styles of speaking. From this, stereotypes are generated. This furthermore indicates how language can indicate identity. Ethnography is a systematic study of a people and their culture. The researcher enters a community with a particular goal and purpose, gains the trust of individuals within the community, then observes and records their behaviors, which includes but is not limited to daily activities, habits, beliefs, rituals, and use of the language, with the goal of describing to the larger community in a credible way. Depending on the discipline the ethnographer is approaching a community, they might seek to identify patterns or themes within that community in order to understand how the individuals function as a group. Heath's approach in Ways with Words is a linguistic anthropologist approach, where she focuses on how the individuals are educated, how they work together, and how they communicate and use language. Heath, Wardhue, and Fuller's texts both describe the term contextualization. Contextualization refers to how we use our background knowledge to navigate through conversations. Speakers and listeners use verbal and nonverbal signs to relate to what is said at any one time and at any one place, to knowledge acquired through their past experiences. Kate Van Sly's text, What If and Why? Literacy Invitation for Multilingual Classrooms, is grounded in that principle of contextualization. In this text, the author introduces the reader to invitations, or curricular invitations, where participants are invited to explore a curricular topic and are invited to use language and other ways of knowing to learn with the context of larger inquiries. In this style of teaching and learning, students learn through language. They learn language and its social implications, helping ELLs to build their communicative competence. Communicative competence is needed for ELLs to be able to socially adapt and develop a sense of belonging in the classroom. It fosters social, emotional, and cognitive growth. The strategies described in Katie Van Sly's text are grounded in the principles by Wardhue and Fuller, and can help support our ELLs in developing that competence, which will in turn enhance their academic achievement in schools.